Hello, 大家好. So today I am going to talk to you a little bit about my studying method for learning Chinese. This is awkward. Microphone's here, my camera's there. Here, I should talk like this, shouldn't I? I don't have to look into the camera. Anyways, this is my first time trying to do this screen capture. So let's just get started. I have one of many different podcasts that I use to learn Chinese. What I do is I listen to a podcast, such as this one, Learn Taiwanese Mandarin, and I go for a walk, I listen to it, or I sit here and put it on while I'm doing something else, etc. Just listening to a podcast, and I try to understand it as well as I can. This podcast and several others, it has a full transcript of the podcast. It's like 95% accurate or so. It's not 100% word for word, but it's very good because it allows me to come back after listening to the podcast and read it. I'm reading. And for words I don't know, I can highlight if needed, and they'll have an instant translation for them, which is one of the reasons that this podcast is the best. And so what this does is it gives me an opportunity to look up the words that I didn't really understand that well. The words that I don't know, or words that I wasn't quite sure which one she was using, all that good stuff. And it's really convenient for learning languages. As I said before, listening is 100% what you should be doing most of. But even if you listen to your favorite song 1,000 times, you may not know all the words. I do think it's more effective to listen to that song over and over again so that you have the melody firmly in your mind. And so when you do look up the words, like what exactly is that word? Oh, it's that word. It instantly falls in place. You put it in the song and you just know that word more or less forever. And I think it's the same thing here with language. So you listen to the podcast. Listen to it several times, and then you look up the words that they used in that podcast. And it really helps you cement those new words and those new definitions in the flow of the language, because you're learning these new words in sentences. You're not just looking up a list of vocabulary that you're going to forget on a test later. You are actually learning these words and cementing them inside your knowledge. I will listen to the podcast. I will read the transcript online here, and then I will listen over and over again until I remember everything. And if I need to, I will read again, but it's very unlikely. Like maybe if I listen to 10 different podcasts, 10 different podcasts could be like 2 months. I might come back and cycle through. And every time I do that, I find that even if I only understood, let's say 60% of this podcast the first time I listened, and by the end of it, I can understand like 95% of it because I listened over and over and I read it. I still understand like 80 to 85% the next time I come through it. Like I have retained a majority of the information that I picked up from doing that podcast. So that's why I think this is one of the most effective ways to learn. The reason I'm showing you this podcast in particular, Learn Taiwanese Mandarin, instead of like mainland Chinese, is just because of the, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear the volume or not.
Hello， 大家好，我是佳瑜，欢迎收听 Learn Taiwanese Mandarin。今天我要跟大家宣布一个好消息，我要告诉大家一个好消息，就是如果你很喜欢我以前做的小妍的一天这个系列。
So picking a podcast like this that speaks at a comfortable pace, that has a transcript available to you. And let me go back to that music analogy. If you read song lyrics 100 times, 1,000 times, you have no idea what the song sounds like. And if you then, after reading the song lyrics 1,000 times, if you then listen to the song, you're not going to suddenly be able to sing the song, even if you have the lyrics memorized perfectly. It's still going to take you time to get used to the melodies. Your pronunciation's going to be off. Like, you develop a melody in your head of what you think it's going to be because you read it over and over again, and you have this internal monologue going on. But again, if you listen to a song 1,000 times and then you looked up the lyrics once, you would instantly be able to sing it. Maybe not perfectly, because we're not all gifted singers, but like you would have no problems. You would have the basic melodies down. And that's one of the reasons why, again, listening is the most important thing you got to do when learning a language. You have to get that music of the flow of the language in your head, stuck in your head, and then you look up the words later. All right, so final aspect. How exactly do I read this? Do I go along translating every time I come across a word I don't know? No, I do not do that. I don't think that's the most effective way. Actually, struggling to remember something and then remembering it and getting it right is the most effective way of cementing that you remember that thing. So what I do is I read and I put the mouse to the side and I read a couple paragraphs at a time as best as I can, and I struggle. And then I go back after a couple paragraphs. I'm like, okay, I understood this section. 如果你喜欢我以前做的小燕的一天，这个 let's say I don't know this word. I know it's Celia, then I would highlight and try and learn Celia. And in many ways, I'm not really focusing on the English. I'm mostly focusing on how do I pronounce that word, because I'm not trying to just look up the vocabulary definition of every single word I don't know. I'm more trying to understand what it means in the context of the whole sentence as a whole. 系列喜欢可以用学习更多像这样的 podcast. 都恭喜你. So I struggled on that word. Is that right? 恭喜. Exactly. It means congratulate. That's exactly what I thought it was. I got it right, and it makes me feel happy. So it's good to struggle and learn how to remember things, because when you do that, you remember it better. The other reason that it's not good, like na, dunks, look it up, 恭喜你. The problem with doing that is I have to remember what these characters look like. Okay, it's not enough to remember 恭喜 means congratulations. You also have to be able to read it. If you look up the word every time you don't understand it, like right away, you don't give your brain enough time to process the character, what it looks like, the little intricacies of it, and remember what it looks like. And I used to do that in the beginning. Every time I came across a word, I didn't know what it was, I would just immediately put my mouse over it. I don't know this word. I don't know this word. And every time I do that, I would find myself, I would forget that same word over and over again, because I didn't struggle enough on it and really look at that character, because I would have that crutch of having English. My brain would be thinking, what's the English translation? Oh, okay, it's that. And then I would just think about it. Okay, the English translation of this word is that, and I just think about that in my head rather than thinking about the character. So read a couple paragraphs at a time, looking at the characters. If you don't know, let's say I don't know what this means, Joshi, it's an easy sentence, but if I don't know what it means, I need to look at that. I need to think about it. I need to embrace it for several minutes. I need to look at that. What does that mean? What does that mean? How do I pronounce it? Okay, I'll come back to it later. I'll keep reading. Maybe it'll click. Maybe later I'll understand what it is. But then I'll come back and I'll reread, and in my reread I look up the words I don't know. I'll be like, oh, it's that. Oh, and the next time I'll know what it means. I have a higher chance of knowing what it means because I struggled with it and I cemented it into my memory. Honestly, one of the most effective, this is a tip I picked up from the book Ultra Learning. One of the most effective techniques for trying to remember something is struggling to remembering it, and then giving an answer, and then getting it right, and then getting feedback that you got it right. For example, coming across words like this, let's say I'm struggling to remember ichie, and I don't highlight with the mouse, I'm reading ichie, like, oh, what is that word? It looks kind of like ichie, but I'm not sure. I think it's ichie, and it means like all the same or something like that. And you struggle and you read a little bit further, and then you come back up later and then confirm that you were correct. Yes, everything all. Confirming that you're correct, like, oh yeah, it's ETA and it means that. Like, okay, I got it. And like, that is really helpful for remembering that word. Okay, so yeah, that's all I'm going to talk to you about today for today's Chinese podcast. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. 再见。